On this episode, I talk 80s horror with my good friend and fellow horseman of the podcast Apocalypse, Jackie Smit of Into the Necrosphere podcast. We go over our top 6 favorite horror films of the 1980s. When you're done with this episode, make sure you check out my other fellow horsemen of the podcast Apocalypse. Everything Went Black, the Necromaniacs podcast, and the Soul Knox podcast. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. All right, Jackie. Thanks for being on the podcast, man. This is killer.
No, it's great to be on, man. And I'm glad we're finally talking properly. I know we've spoken a lot on Instagram and things like that, but it's very cool this community that has sprung up around our podcasts. So I think it's great that we're getting to do some shows together as well. Obviously I've had Mike on my podcast many times. But I was for sure thinking of at some point getting you on, getting Carl on, asking Mike Scandato if he wants to be on. As I said, great. Thanks for having me. And also, since you've kind of joined the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, I've been loving everything that you do. I listen every single week. It's, in my view, if you're a horror fan, there's absolutely no good reason on earth why you shouldn't be listening to Horrible 666.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I love everything we're doing with the Horsemen of the Podcast Apocalypse. I even love the name that, we're giving this community that we built. And I just think it's really cool. Like, it's all good quality stuff run by really cool people,
Yeah, and there's kind of a different flavor. It's different flavors of the same drink at the end of the day. We're all into very similar stuff, but we come at it from different angles. In a way, I kind of feel a little jealous as a fan, like when before, I started podcasting and before all of these other shows kind of came up, there weren't all these men, all that many around doing what, I wanted to hear. And I feel like with the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, we're sort of catering to that almost 7 days a week now.
Yeah, we got something for everybody. We got fucking metal, we got horror. We got stuff on the occult. I mean, it's all covered.
Yeah. You're going to have me ranting, and using profanity for an hour straight if you stick around after the interview on Into the Necrosphere. So, there's definitely something for everybody. It'll hopefully grow as well. There's one or two more folks that I know are in the midst of starting podcasts, or at the very least they plan to do so. So, once they join and we'll hit that 7 day a week cadence, and I think that's going to be awesome.
I think hearing from your podcast that Katie from Season of Mist is going to be starting a podcast, or she already started that podcast.
So she was the person I was actually referring to. No, she hasn't for some reason, and I did message her a little while back, and I said, "When are you going to do it?" But she answered all the other questions in my message, but not that one. I know she has also started doing some independent work, from a PR perspective, and I do suspect that it's probably a case of her being just absolutely rammed with work, outside of even thinking of doing any sort of podcasting work. But she'll be back on Into the Necrosphere at some point in the not too distant future. We've already spoken about it. Probably early next year, I'll have her back on. Her last episode is still the most downloaded episode of Into the Necrosphere I ever put up, and it was also probably by far the most controversial. So, it's I was super surprised when I started seeing the views and the downloads and stuff just ticking up on that one. Very happy, of course, but it's also nice with her. She's used to this format of, I think when you have a podcast and there's free form dialogue and stuff back and forth, you sometimes run the risk of hitting that one introvert who is just not, they just don't have it in them to be particularly conversational. And it's not a slight on them, they're just not suited to the style of content.
Right.
But she definitely is. I mean, she's a fucking awesome guest, and I mean, it's someone I regard as a pretty good friend as well. So
yeah, it was a great episode. Yeah, Katie's killer. So I'm looking forward to when she does start the podcast, throwing her into the Horsemen of the Podcast Apocalypse, and we'll have like 7 days covered. So everybody should be good for whatever they're into. We got you covered.
I was about to say that's when the merchandising empire begins as well. So, I did say to Mike, like, we need to think about something that we can do as a collective. Like, I don't know what it is yet, but I feel like we should be doing something to sort of have this sort of one unified. Oh no, I wouldn't say branding, but you know what I mean. Take the horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse and kind of take it to the next level. I just don't know exactly what we would do to do that, but I mean, the one thing that would be fucking great, one of us wins the lottery, and we can start one of those like Austin, Texas podcasting studios where everyone just comes to do their shows at. Yeah, those are. We'll save that pipe dream for another time. But I definitely feel like there's more stuff we can do together as a collective.
Yeah, I totally feel that. I've been thinking about stuff too, so I'm gonna continue thinking on different things. And whenever I have a decent idea to throw out there, I'll definitely throw it out. Y'all just wait and see what you think. But yeah, I see this. I see it growing. You know, it has grown. Like, it's fucking cool. You know, like, I see people that like your podcast or like Mike's, and then I see them on my page now liking my podcast here, or some of my people liking y'all stuff. I'm like, it's so fucking cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the thing that's also great. I don't know if you've had the same with yours. I would imagine that you have. We're all pretty open-minded and free-thinking, and I especially get into some reasonably spicy topics on my podcast from time to time. But I do think we've been fortunate thus far that we seem to attract a. I mean, it's a niche audience, but a niche audience of very like-minded people. And so I think even the audience, and maybe this is the opportunity that we have, maybe the creating some sort of community around that audience is the way to go. Because I suspect if you got everybody in obviously not a small room, but a significantly sized stadium, and you said, all right, you guys are all fans of, the Everything Went Black, Necromaniacs, Into the Necrosphere, Horrible 666, and Sol Nox, I suspect they will all have a reasonable degree in common and probably get on with each other really well. Which is great. I mean, that's the one thing when I started my podcast and it started to pick up and get attention that I always dreaded. I didn't want to have to listen to a load of people complaining about the content or complaining about people I was talking to or saying this band sucks, why are you featuring them, or why do you say that record is good or that record's good. Unfortunately, in over 3 years of doing this, I've virtually never had that. I've had a couple of complaints here and there, but nothing that you look and you go, Jesus, why am I attracting this type of asshole to the show?
Right. Yeah. Same here. I haven't had any issues. I think I've been doing the podcast now for a year and a few months. I'm not 100% sure. I got to look back on that because I originally started off doing the Hardwolf 666 website, writing reviews for a couple of years, but I just kind of got boring, man. I was getting a lot of stuff in that I didn't want to really write about. That wasn't inspiring me and stuff. I'm like, it's got to be another outlet I can, move forward with stuff. And that's where the podcast things came on. And, Mike was responsible for a lot of it, just encouraging me like, hey, you should do a podcast and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. And one day I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do it, so.
Yeah, no, well, he's a great dude. And, I think good man to spot talent. And I was probably in a similar boat to you. I think when I started into the Necrosphere, I had been doing writing for Metal Rules and for Chronicles of Chaos. I enjoyed the writing, but it was kind of the same thing as you just said. Now, I got one after the other metalcore review or metalcore release to review or melodic death metal release to review. And how many more times can I say a band that sounds like In Flames is shit and it doesn't appeal to me?
Right.
And then you think to yourself, well, it does appeal to a bunch of other people. So I also don't want to spend my time running anything down. But, at the same time, the record labels, when you're writing for a website, they expect you to review the things that they send you, understandably so. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to get away from that and do exactly what I wanted to do. Which is talk about exactly what I want to interview, who I want to interview, and create something that I wasn't at that time seeing in the metal scene. I was at so many press days and stuff like that, and I listened to some of the questions being asked of the bands, and I just thought to myself, how fucking bored must these poor guys be? And then I also thought to myself, as a fan, I'm not interested in that canned question style of interviewing. I'm interested in a conversation. I'm interested in, like, you and I talking and getting to know each other. That's what I want to replicate on my podcast. So now when I have people on, I tell them straight off the bat, like, if they've never met me before, I say, look, just so you know, I don't prepare any questions. I don't even think of what the conversation is going to be about until we actually start. I only get people on the show who I actually like and whose art I'm interested in and who I think would be interesting guests and interesting people. But we hit record and we go, and wherever the conversation takes us, that's where the conversation takes us. And I do tell them from, again, if it's somebody new, I do ask them, is there anything you want me to avoid talking about? Some people will say politics, and some people, or most people, will say nothing. But I make sure they're comfortable with that. But then once they're comfortable, you can just see people just open up, and they'll take the conversation in the direction, or the conversation will take itself in the direction where it needs to go, and where it's going to be, where both parties are going to be most interested, or have the most positive energy.
Yeah, and that's cool. I love the way you do them. I mean, that's the way you should do it. That's also how Mick Garris does his stuff on his podcast, Postmortem. You've said that before. Like, I go on and we have a conversation. I touch on a few topics that I want to know about. I don't have shit written down and stuff like that, because then it sounds really sterile.
It does, yeah. And the thing is, it's also, again, if you're a fan, of course there's going to be stuff you're going to want to know about. I've got Greg McIntosh coming on the podcast in the next. I think he's not going to be on this week. He'll be on next week. So I would assume by the time this episode goes up, it'll be the day after that Greg's going to be on. I mean, of course, there was a bunch of shit that I wanted to find out about Paradise Lost. I mean, I've admired this guy's guitar playing probably more than just about anybody else for all of my life. So, I will confess to anybody who before they've heard that episode, I will preemptively apologize that my inner fan did come out a lot, but that's kind of also part of why I do it. I do it because I'm a fan, because I love this music, because I love the scene, I love the lifestyle associated with it. I love every single thing about it, and that's why I do it. And I hope that comes out in the podcast.
Oh, it definitely does. It shows, and that's why you have the best metal podcast around, in my opinion. So,
thank you very much.
All right, so on this episode today, we're going to talk some of our favorite 80s horror films. I kind of narrowed it down to like a kind of a top six, but I know my top six it's a loose top six because there's so much good shit that came out in the 80s. So I just picked six that I really like. The number one that I did pick is probably my favorite film of all time, as well as favorite 80s film. So that's going to be pretty solid. But everything else from there is like, some of my favorites.
Yeah, so I've got my top six. I will say I feel slightly intimidated in the presence of a true subject matter expert, because I think your tastes probably are a little bit more sophisticated than mine. If we were to liken this to wine drinking, I'm on the fucking fermented grape juice that somebody made in their bathtub, and you're probably on the vintage Pinot Noir. But no, I was excited about it because I grew up in the 80s. What year were you born?
I was born in 85.
All right, I was born in 80, so I definitely grew up in the 80s. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it was like the one of the golden ages of horror. I will definitely say I think in terms of my tastes, they veered more towards because I've always loved horror, but as I grew older and discovered different stuff, I really started getting into Japanese and South Korean horror movies. Mm-hmm. And in the main, I find a lot of stuff that comes out of South Korea is more interesting to me than stuff that comes out of Hollywood. But I mean, that being said, there's so much to choose from when it comes to the 80s. It's fucking insane. So how do you want to do this? Do you want me to shall we do one for one?
Yeah, I'm down with that. We'll let you start off with your let's start at number 6 and work our way up. So let's do that. So
all right,
have you start off with your number 6.
So number 6 for me was a difficult one because that's the one that you cut off, right? And there was a couple that were in consideration. Pet Sematary from 1989 was definitely one of those. That's a film I love. But the one I decided on for number 6 was Angel Heart,
Oh,
which is the Alan Parker movie, starred Mickey Rourke, Robert De Niro, Lisa Bonet. Lisa Bonet obviously making a huge amount of splash in the film because previously she was a Huxtable,
hmm.
and in this movie she's naked. she's plenty naked in the movie.
Hmm.
You had Robert De Niro, probably in my view, doing the best version of Lucifer that I've seen on film, and then you
Yes.
had Mickey Rourke absolutely in his prime. In terms of how he looked, he's acting. It's just a phenomenal film, and I know when it first came out, it was it came out to a lot of controversy, not just because of Lisa Bonet, but I think the box office response was pretty underwhelming. But in time, it's kind of grown, and I think a lot of people have grown to love and appreciate it. I was pretty young when I saw it for the first time. I think I was only about 13 or 14, but I loved it from first viewing, and it's still a film that I love. I love every single thing about the atmosphere they create in it. I love the occult side of things, the unease that's kind of through the whole movie, the whole sort of noir, splash that they've given it. I think it's fucking fantastic.
That's crazy that that's your number six because that's my number six as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love
I
Angel
had
Heart.
I had this exact same thing happen with Mike when we were doing. I think we were doing like a top 10 countdown of albums, and it was, I think our top three ended up being exactly the same, and we hadn't even spoken, we hadn't even shared lists beforehand. Which you and I, just for anyone listening, we haven't spoken about what they are either.
No, it's just I love when that happens. It's fucking cool, and great minds think alike. So
Yeah. And as I said, I was dithering on a couple. Like I said, Pet Cemetery was there. Mostly that's more from a good memories perspective, right? When I was young, it was I adored that movie growing up. But the more accomplished film, the movie that has stood the test of time, the one that's got the best acting, best script, Angel Heart, without a doubt.
yeah, 100% on that. And with my top six, I didn't really go obscure. I stayed with pretty much like some popular stuff that a lot of people know. I could have went really weird and crazy with it, but there's so many goddamn choices. I'm going with the stuff that I feel the most, So um, so with like I said, my number six is also Angel Heart, and I love it for all the same reasons you do. The super dark atmosphere, and fucking Robert De Niro as the devil. It doesn't get better than that, like the whole scene where he's sitting there peeling the egg with those nails. It's just like it's so
Yeah.
subtle, but it's so fucking it works.
Well, the thing is, I also feel like it's very much an underappreciated role that he took on, right? People will remember him for Taxi Driver, or they'll remember him for Raging Bull, or they'll remember him for Casino or Goodfellas, but Heat. I mean, there's tons of movies that he'll be very fondly remembered for. But the average movie fan, the average Robert De Niro fan, if you ask them, what's some of his best performances, they're not instantly going to say Angel Heart. But I truly believe that the character of Cypher, I just think he absolutely nailed. As you say, he didn't kind of ham it up the way that Al Pacino did on The Devil's Advocate.
Mhm.
There's like a subtle menace to the Cypher character, um, that and there's this kind of tension that menace creates that is just absolutely mesmerizing. I mean, every single time he's on screen, you just can't look away.
Yeah, it's just super heavy. It's like almost like a slow, heavy doom song. That's how I see his portrayal as Lucifer. Is just like heavy and nasty. Like it's not outlandish or anything like you see a lot of other like portrayals of like the devil or something. It's just very like I don't know. It's dark, gloomy, and this he killed it. And like I said, yeah, if you ask most people what top 10 films of Robert De Niro was starred in or whatever, this probably wouldn't be one of them because probably I've never seen it before.
Yeah. And I mean, I will also admit readily, as a young man, I had the most raging crush on Lisa Bonet
Oh yeah.
imaginable. So that did help increase the enjoyment of the film tremendously. And I've always been a fan of Mickey Rourke. I'd always hoped for better in his career. I was glad that he managed to do something like The Wrestler and at least do some degree of comeback that was, there was that gave him the level of critical acclaim that I think he deserved. But I mean, in this movie is fucking brilliant. By the way, I don't know how big of a Christopher Nolan fan you are. I can take or leave a lot of what he does. I'm a big fan of Dunkirk. I really like Memento. But one thing that I remember reading a while back is apparently this movie was a major influence on Memento.
Huh.
He said that basically like the idea of the fractured narrative, which obviously Memento is built around in its entirety, that was basically the main reason or one of the main influences on how Memento ended up turning out. He said that and The Wall was his two big influences.
Okay. And the director of Angel Heart, Alan Parker, also did some directing with some Pink Floyd stuff too. So it's kind of a weird coincidence there.
Yeah. The other thing that I always thought was pretty interesting about Angel Heart is, I don't know whether this is rumor or not, but I know Robert Redford was initially considered for the Cypher role. I can see. I think Dustin Hoffman might have been considered for it as well. I can see De Niro nailing it. Robert Redford as the devil, I'm not so sure about.
Yeah, I don't see that at all. Yeah, I never see Redford playing any like evil characters ever that I know of. I'm not a big fan of Robert Redford and his work, because those type of films I don't really care too much about. But I can't see him playing like a devil role.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was about to say, I don't actually think again, someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't actually think he's never been a villain on a movie. I don't believe.
I don't think so. I have to look into that, but not off the top of my head, I don't think so.
No, which made it very ballsy for That's why I appreciate guys that are typecast as good guys when they go out and they do a villain and they absolutely nail it. Like Denzel Washington in Training Day. I mean,
Right.
that to me was
Yeah.
just fucking incredible. I mean, I know it's off topic. It's not a horror movie, but Jesus Christ, what a film and what a performance.
Oh yeah, it's a great film. I'm a fan of Denzel Washington, anyways. I think he's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
and
me too.
That really showed some of his skill there.
Yeah.
There's a
Big
fun
time.
fact. Since you said Robert Redford was considered for the role of Lucifer, so was Marlon Brando, if you can believe that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Marlon Brando was like old and fat by that point.
Let's see, 87. Yeah, he was getting there. He's getting real close there, because when he played in was it The Island of Dr. Monroe? I don't know if you ever seen a remake of that. It came out like in the
Yeah.
90s. Yeah. That was at his pinnacle of fatness, I think it was.
Yeah.
And that whole movie was a fucking mess. Like the whole production and everything was a mess. Crazy ass movie. And yeah, I've heard some stories about Marlon Brando on that set. So
I'll also say, just as a final comment on Angel Heart, I think the way that they treated things like the voodoo elements and the occult, I think that they nailed the tone and they nailed the deployment of those influences on that movie extremely well, because I love when they bring that into movies, but it's so rare that they get it right. They either turn it into something completely cartoonish, or they turn it into something that doesn't really have the necessary teeth, if you know what I mean. Like I really enjoyed House of the Devil as an example, but I always thought to myself, like, House of the Devil, they should have turned the juice up a little bit in that movie. Like
right.
Not just have the discovery of the ritual. There should have been something a bit more shocking. There needs to be something a bit more visceral about that. I think really the only other movie that I can think of that immediately comes to mind where they nail the occult tone of it perfectly is Hereditary. And I can go on for an entire episode about how much I love that movie, but yeah, with this one, I thought they did it really well, because again, if you bring in voodoo and the occult into a plot like this, it can very easily turn into something that's really camp, and that just ends up being, it's counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
But I mean, they again absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, totally agree. All your points I agree on, man. Like, this is, to me, one of the best portrayals of Lucifer in any any movie to ever come out, in my opinion. And yeah, it's a great one, and it stands the test of time. Like it's fucking awesome. And for people who haven't seen it, it was streaming up on Amazon and I think Hulu, but it's always streaming on somewhere, so you can usually catch it. And we highly recommend you check that out.
Well, if you're a 4K collector, I think they did a 4K remaster of it that is also out, which
Oh, yeah.
I own, but I've not yet watched. Um, and I own it because there's I can't remember what the channel is called. There's a 4K Blu-ray review site channel, sorry, on YouTube.
Mhm.
And apparently, and the guy that runs that said that they did a really good job with it.
Cool. Yeah, I got to look for that one. I don't have that in my collection. I actually have I believe I have this on DVD and possibly a VHS of it somewhere. So
Yeah, cool. All right, so number 5 is where you're potentially going to throw the or cut the call off and cancel this episode. So my number 5, A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mm.
I fully concede that the rest of the franchise is a fucking shambles. And probably if you asked me 3-4 years ago, I wouldn't have put this movie in my top 6. However, I went back to it about 4 or 5 years ago, and almost kind of just because we were bored during it actually wasn't lockdown, sorry, it was pre-lockdown. But a friend of mine and I were bored, and we were kind of reminiscing about old movies, and one day we got the idea to get some beers and watch as many of the Nightmare on Elm Street as we could.
Hmm.
And rewatching the first one, I kind of kept on thinking to myself, like, this is actually a lot better than I remember it being. It has a lot of the tropes that got watered down and used on all of those sequels, and obviously all of the many teen slashers that came out after. But I mean, there was something about Freddy in that first movie that was genuinely menacing and nasty. Robert Englund did a fucking incredible job of that role. I mean, he did such a good job of that role. It's truly something that nobody else can do, and they shouldn't ever bother trying to remake it. I love Jackie Earl Haley, but I mean, he was an absolute disaster as Freddy.
Oh yeah.
And just I like the aesthetics of the makeup. I like the vibe of the movie. I just think I generally don't enjoy movies like that. I've never liked kind of teen slashers at all. But for whatever reason, there was just something. It's like when you listen to a record, and for a period of time the album sucked, and then one day you just listen to it and just hit you at the right time, and you just loved it. And I kind of feel like that about Nightmare on Elm Street. It was obviously a movie I grew up with as well. There was no video night that you went to with a couple of your friends and a couple of the girls from school that you didn't have Nightmare on Elm Street as one of the movies that you watched. But watching it many years later as an adult, I kind of have a different appreciation for it and a much greater enjoyment of it, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, is definitely the darkest of the whole series. It's before Freddy kind of like starts bringing in all the humor, where you kind of like, oh yeah, Freddy's funny and also kind of scary. But the first one was just like Freddy's a fucking motherfucker. He's not funny at all. It's super dark, super serious compared to the sequels. So I
Yeah.
totally dig the first one a lot. But I am also a fan of the sequels. I think they're fun, and some of the special effects in them are just fucking insane, especially for the time.
Well, in that marathon where we rewatched everything, I definitely 2 I didn't like, 3 I thought was cool, 4 I think is a guilty pleasure, and then frankly as is 5 and 6. I mean, Freddy's Dead is actually terrible, but it's one of those movies that's so unbelievably terrible. It's very entertaining to watch. I mean, the Alice Cooper cameo as an example is fucking brilliant.
Right.
The whole like, Freddy, you ready for it, boy? It's absolute genius. But it's yeah, I think again that's you kind of nailed why I like the first one so much. There wasn't anything that was remotely funny about it. I am a bit of a purist in that sense. I've never really liked comedy in horror.
Right.
I think death is a serious subject. Like I don't want it to just disappear of its own anus, but I think generally speaking, I prefer death and murder and stuff to be treated seriously in a horror movie. I've never really liked horror comedies at all. They just don't do much for me. I want to have that degree of almost unease and shock, and I don't really get scared often, but like you know what I mean. That for me to invest, it must feel like the movie maker or the filmmaker or the director, the writer is taking seriously what they're presenting to me.
Right. Yeah, I like my horror films to feel like dangerous and make you feel uneasy. That's the feeling I like
100%,
to go for. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and Wes Craven nailed it with this one. And he's nailed it with a lot of his films, but especially with the first Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they made a total mess of it when they did too. But that's a different story.
Right, yeah. And like I said, the sequels are fun. They're not great, but they are fun to watch, especially if you get some time to kill and you're a big Freddy fan. Because after watching these films at a young age, like Freddy was in my dreams, like, but in my dreams he was friends with me, so it was fucking weird, man. Like every other night I'd be having dreams of Freddy, like he's coming down in like an ice cream truck, hanging out and stuff. It's the weirdest shit. And sometimes he would be chasing me around, but I had Freddy dreams for years, like super odd.
I was like that with the movie that really scared the bejesus out of me was Alien.
Right.
When I was desperate to watch it. Like I've always been very interested in darker stuff, horror or whatnot. I remember when I was a kid, like practically just learning to read at school. I used to leaf through our TV guide all the time and like see these movies that was showing on our version of cable, and it would be stuff like Alien and The Fly and things like that. And I'd be just for whatever reason I'd always be drawn to it. So Alien was one that I was drawn to in particular. And this is still the old days where your parents left you at home without a second thought. I got chickenpox when I was in second grade, so I was 8 years old. Which is you start school in South Africa at the age of 7, then you're in first grade. So just to kind of give some context to that. So I was 8 years old, had chickenpox, wasn't really ill, but I was at home for 2 weeks. I had the fucking time of my life. But one of the things I set my heart on doing was I was going to watch Alien. My parents weren't going to allow me to, so I waited for them to fall asleep. Leopard crawled into the living room, set the VCR to record Alien. Excuse me. And then the next day, I remember being so excited to see it when I heard the cars disappear down the driveway. I was up like a light down into the living room, video on. I got to the part where they're on the planet and the facehugger jumps out onto John Hurt's mask. And I got such a fright. I jumped up, switched the TV off, ran to my bedroom and hid under the duvet. And I had nightmares for 3 weeks straight at a minimum. Yeah, that was Alien was like my Nightmare on Elm Street for you.
Yeah, I totally can understand that. Alien is fucking terrifying, and yeah, like I said, the sequels are cool too. I really like Alien 2 a lot, but that's more of an action sci-fi horror. Alien itself is just fucking is horror, like straight up horror, and yeah, frightening.
Oh, it's masterpiece. I've watched that movie so many times already, and I every single time I see it, I love it. It's an absolute masterpiece, and like it's a movie that celebrated a female hero, heroine, way before any of that was cool, and they did it in such a stylish, and such an authentic way. I love the fact that the way the film is framed, you don't think that Sigourney Weaver is going to be the hero of the piece,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's almost this journey that you follow, of her kind of having to find that extra gear or extra 2 gears in her to overcome the monster, and then she does it so well. But I mean, just what a fucking incredible film.
Oh, totally. Yeah, Ripley's a badass, and that film's fucking great and stands the test of time.
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
All right, so let's go to my number 5. This one's pretty mainstream, I think, for the most part, but this was a big favorite of mine and still is. I recently watched this one earlier this year on like a 4K scan or something like that. It's like this looks super great, but it's 1988's A Serpent in the Rainbow. This like if you're in, it almost falls in line with a lot with what we just talked about with Angel Heart. Dealing with like voodoo stuff, the cult and everything like that. this is just so good. And this was from Wes Craven, who did A Nightmare on Elm Street, of course. But super dark atmosphere, this really brooding film. Like it's almost like it's mean. There's no humor in this at all. It's just really mean film, and I think it captures that like that the voodoo culture feel and stuff too that I've researched before. I think it really captures all that, and it's a dark trip, man. It's like and it holds up today. Like all the special effects and stuff, everything's still really killer. Like I love Serpent and the Rainbow.
I've never seen it, and I can't believe that I haven't. I didn't even realize that it was a Wes Craven movie.
Mm-hmm.
But you've absolutely just got me onto something that I'm going to add to the list of stuff I have to see. What was the 4K scan like?
It was great, and I'm trying to figure out where I watched it. I think it could have been off of the Arrow player. I don't know if you have that, but it's a Arrow app. I highly recommend getting that if you don't have it. And so it was a streaming 4K, so it's not like I didn't actually have the 4K disc, but it still looked fucking fantastic. I've never seen it look so good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, dude, well, I'm without a shadow of a doubt gonna have to see that.
Oh, it is so damn good, man. It's and the main star is Bill Pullman, and if you're a fan of him, which I am, he's always pretty solid and everything. This is one of his like best roles. And yeah, like I said, it would make a great double feature with Angel Heart. That'd be like a perfect double feature, I think. To check both of those out, because deals a lot of the same things, but this deals more with trying to finding the secret to bring back the dead, pretty much like making them your slaves and stuff, like the true, I guess, origin of zombies. That's what this whole, trying to investigate like a different drug to help, bring people back or increase longevity and stuff. And then this goes into a downward spiral of hell,
Yeah, I see you can rent it on Amazon Prime. I'm definitely going to get that. I'm definitely going to check that out. That sounds fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's fucking great. Highly recommend anybody checking that one out that's into like the occult and super dark stuff. This one will get you. This will fulfill your needs for sure. So definitely want to check out The Serpent and the Rainbow.
Awesome. All right, so my number 4, we've skated around it already, but Aliens is my number 4. I loved Alien. I prefer Alien to Aliens, but it's a very, very, very thin margin. I mean, they're two very different movies, but it's a perfect sequel. It's a perfect sequel in that Alien sets the scene for what's to come, and Aliens has a natural progression from what happened in Alien, as opposed to the myriad sequels. If we were talking about sequels earlier, where it kind of feels like it's in a way it's a reset, but they're just sort of going through the same formula that they did on the first or the second or the third movie, and then they're going to figure out a different way to kill the bad guy at the end, whereas Aliens is something totally different. I thought that James Cameron used some very interesting techniques to help build the tension. The very famous radar detection, where you can see, one alien and then two aliens, and then suddenly there's like thousands in the room with them. I think stuff like that was awesome. It really freaked me out when I was a kid. But another powerhouse performance from Sigourney Weaver. I mean, just all round phenomenal film, and actually still looks really good today. And I use my fiance as a litmus test for some of these things, because she's 15 years younger than I am. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when I show her an old movie, I'm always curious to see how she responds to it, because very often, because she didn't grow up with these things, she doesn't have any kind of emotional or sentimental attachment to them. Certainly not like I do, but she fucking loved Aliens. I'd say probably out of all the older movies I've shown her, that's probably her favorite.
That's killer. Yeah, I love Aliens too. Like, it's just an exciting movie. You got so much going on. You got the Marines coming in versus the aliens, and there's a bunch of them and stuff. It's, like I said, it's a really good action sci-fi horror film. Actually, one of the best. I would throw it up there with like The Predator and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, also one of the best performances that Bill Paxton ever did, and some of the best lines ever. The whole "game over, man, game over." I mean,
yeah.
I saw Aliens at the Royal Albert Hall. And I've spoken about this on Into the Necrosphere as well, but I saw it at the Royal Albert Hall in 2017, I think. And they had the London Philharmonic Orchestra doing the score. So they had like the film up on the screen, and then they had the orchestra in the pit below, and they were doing the score. And right at the end of the film, there's this old guy walks on stage, and I sort of did a bit of a double take, and then I suddenly clocked that was James Cameron. I was like, Jesus. And then literally about a minute later, this lady walks on stage, and I was like one of those, like one of the girls at the height of Beatlemania. As my brain registered who it was, I was like, "Oh my God, that's Ripley!" And she got. I mean, I've been at so many, wrestling events and shows, and UFC events and stuff like that. I've heard crowds lose it when somebody is on, or, shows up on stage. I've heard a crowd pop. I've never ever heard a response like I heard for Sigourney Weaver that evening. And I thought to myself, imagine how that must feel. Like, you've had all these fucking nerds watching you on screen, cheering you on, and then you come out to that sort of response so many years later for something you did, back in, I think it was 1986. An incredible movie. And again, has not, in my view, lost any of the magic that it had when it first came out.
No, totally. And like Aliens is kind of one of a kind. Like a lot of these 80s movies are like, you're never going to see that type of film nowadays. Like you just, I don't know, it's like something they captured. They captured magic back then in the 80s with these like action sci-fi films. Like, this film here and Predator 2, it's like most of the Arnold films, they all have like that certain magic to them that you just don't see anymore. And I really miss that.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, and the problem is that it's because of the financing of the the films nowadays. Like if you think of Aliens, right? If you were to think about Aliens filmed in 2022, you would probably suggest the budget for that movie is going to be anywhere north of 200 to 250 million dollars, which means that suddenly you have to have banks come in and help bankroll it. You have to have like serious money behind it. And what I've come to understand from a lot of interviews and stuff that I've read is when that serious money is involved, they all want a say in what goes on in the script. And so a lot of the scripts that we end up seeing are completely butchered from what was originally suggested by the director or the screenwriter. And that's why so much of what we watch nowadays is so watered down. And whereas in the 70s and the 80s, you had none of that. The actual budget for Aliens, as an example, $18.5 million.
Wow, that's
nothing. For a movie of that scale. I mean,
right.
Nowadays you can barely film a fucking scene with that. I mean, there was that movie with the reshoots with Mark Wahlberg, and I think they gave him $15 million just for the reshoots.
Wow.
So it's it's just I think a lot of why films have become so watered down, especially mainstream movies, I think is because of the it's because of how expensive it's become to do films. And as a result, there's an awful lot of compromise that has to, go along with the development of any project. Whereas, 30 years ago, that was not the case. You could. I think the end result was a lot closer to the original vision than anything that we would see right now.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree on that. Definitely going to be budget issues nowadays. Everything's a lot more. So.
Yeah, exactly. And previously, you could have Sigourney Weaver just be Sigourney Weaver. Now there's going to be all kinds of demographic criteria that she's going to have to, that she would have to subscribe to either her or other characters in the movie, and it's just not. It doesn't make, I think, for good, authentic art.
Right.
You need to have something that is true to what the writer envisioned and what he or she, wanted for that project when they, first came up with the idea.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. All right, so we're going to be hitting on my number 4, which you may have seen this one, you may have not seen this one. Hopefully you haven't. That way you have something else to check out. But it's also a Bill Paxton movie, and my favorite Bill Paxton performance is from 1987's Near Dark, the really, really killer vampire film, which they never actually used the word vampire in the whole film, but we know they're vampires. It was a Catherine Bigelow film, and it has Lance Henriksen and fucking Bill Paxton. I mean, you can't really go wrong with that. And they're both playing like these nomadic travelers who, they lure people in different states that they're at or whatever town they come in, drink their blood and keep on moving. But they're more nomads than anything else. And the word vampire is not used in the whole film, but we know they're vampires. Fucking light burns them. They drink blood. They live forever. So it's kind of like it's very similar to what's kind of similar to the Lost Boys in a way. It's kind of like maybe another tribe that was around in the same Lost Boys universe. I could see them kind of coexisting, maybe. But this one's really dark, really atmospheric. Like I said, it's some of the best Bill Paxton lines are in this film. He plays a character called Severin, and he's unforgettable. I just love it. This thing is great. So, yeah. So if you haven't seen Near Dark, it's fucking awesome.
I have seen it, but it was years back, and again, it's immediately back on the list now. So, and I was just thinking of something as you were saying about Catherine Bigelow. What a career that woman has had. I mean, not just horror, but after Near Dark, she did Point Break, which was great. Then she did Strange Days, which I absolutely loved. K-19, The Widowmaker, not so much. The Hurt Locker was fucking incredible. I remember seeing that. I shan't say how I procured it, but I procured a copy a year before it came out because there was one floating about in the cyberspace, and just being absolutely blown away by how good it was. And then Zero Dark 30 I loved as well. Detroit I haven't seen yet, which was the last one that she made, but yeah, she's had way harder hits in her career than she's had misses, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, dude, Point Break's one of the best movies ever made in any genre, in my opinion.
Yeah.
God damn, as I said, I miss Patrick Swayze.
Very much so. She has been on a tear, but and Near Dark was her second film.
Mm-hmm. And I think she struck gold with it, man. It's not gonna be for everybody because it is a bit of a slow burn. If you're looking for like a straight up fucking action vampire film, this is not the one for you. But it's a nice slow burn, and it shows a different aspect of like the whole vampire mythos and stuff. Like they're more looked upon as like regular people to an extent. She does start going kind of crazy towards the end of that, but there's like a bunch of nomads trying to do their own thing and keep on living. So
yeah, and those are the vampire movies I tend to prefer anyway. I've always the vampire mythos is to me very similar to the zombie mythos in which it has been misused and watered down and made or rendered pointless by so many fucking shitty movies. But then every so often when they nail it, when they get it really, really right is when it's perfect.
Yeah, totally. And hopefully we don't see any more zombie movies. I know we will, but we had that whole influx of zombie movies for past 10 years where every fucking year is another stupid ass zombie. I'm so tired of zombies. Like, zombies are cool and everything. That was like 20 years ago. I thought they were cool. I can't stand zombie films nowadays because it's the same old shit.
Yeah, I mean, for me, zombie movies kind of ended when Train to Busan came out. I thought Train to Busan did it so well. It's like you watch it and you go, well, what's the point of attempting another zombie movie for at least the next decade after this has been released?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. That was a masterpiece of a film, and yeah, it's hard to top that one, especially anything new.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
All right, so it's on to my number 3. Now, I will say, by the way, I am a big fan of the slow burn as well. I prefer the slow burn, actually. But I think it's not coming out in the choices I've made in my movies. It kind of is present in my number 3. But my number 3 is probably in my top 20 all-time, all-genre list as well, The Thing.
Nice.
Which my favorite John Carpenter movie, my favorite Kurt Russell performance. That movie, I mentioned earlier about aliens not losing a step. I mean, The Thing, if you watch the 4K transfer that they've just put out, it actually still looks like, I would say, with the exception of a couple of bits, it almost still feels like a modern film. Like it could compete. It could come out today, and if marketed properly, I reckon it would be a huge movie. It nails that simmering slow build tension really well, but when shit kicks off, it really kicks off. It's set in an environment that's custom made for great horror. And then I think a lot of people have spoken about this. I think Mike Scandato mentioned this on a recent Necromaniacs episode as well. but the creature effects in the thing is part of what makes it so effective. If you made that movie in modern times and you replaced everything with CGI, it would suck.
Oh yeah.
But because of the way the creature effects are implemented on the thing, it's just fucking brilliant. It's so unnerving to see, and it kind of takes me back again to being a kid and looking on the back of video covers and seeing these the old like VHS covers where you had like snippets of the gore to follow, and it'll be like a guy there with his stomach out and all sorts of shit. The thing is almost like the living embodiment of the back of a VHS cover. It is just a fucking fantastic film.
Yeah, and it holds the test of time. Like those special effects are still so fucking good, so gruesome, and just like very, very Lovecraftian feeling too. With all the fucking tentacles and yeah, super Lovecraftian. And this, what a great film. I mean, it would be on my top 6 too, but I figure you'd probably have it on your top 6, and I just want to keep a little bit different. So, but that's one of my favorite films of all time as well.
I have a friend, so Jeremy Wagner of Broken Hope. He is completely and utterly obsessed with the movie, and he has spent his life procuring memorabilia from the set.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, he has the original model, I think it's like a silicon model that was used for that Norwegian scientist that they find on the table with his like stomach open. I think he's got like a whole warehouse just full of stuff dedicated, like that he bought over the years, straight off of the set of the thing. But he goes pretty deep into it. But when I go visit him in Chicago or Miami or wherever it is he's living at the time I finally make it over to the States, I'm very much looking forward to seeing all that stuff. But one thing that I love about that movie is the idea that the monster can be anything. Mm-hmm. And I think just with that vehicle, they raised the tension and they raised the suspense in that movie so much. Rather than it just be, being a monster stalking people, through the passageways or whatever the case may be. I mean, in the setting they had it in, I'm pretty sure John Carpenter could have done something great that way as well. But it kind of steps up several gears because of the shape-shifting abilities of the monster itself.
Right. It makes you feel like no one's safe because you don't know who the monster is,
Yeah. No, 100%. And as I said, fantastic movie.
Also, that film captures like the total feel of like coldness and isolation. Like that's a big overpowering factor with that film. It just captures that so well,
Yeah. And I mentioned Kurt Russell, by the way. I have to also shout out Keith David. I love him as an actor anyway. He's comedic timing is spot on. I mean, every now and then I still break out into like sniggers just thinking about some of his stuff in There's Something About Mary.
Oh yeah.
But he's just so good in this movie too. He's a perfect foil for all the other characters, especially for Kurt Russell's character. And then needed to make sure he got a shout out as well.
Oh yeah, he's part of the old guard of these like badass like kind of action figure type dudes we had in the 80s and the 90s that are slowly dying off because of age and everything else, and it's pretty fucking sad. Like seeing Sylvester Stallone, fucking 80 years old right now, and then Arnold's like right behind him. It's like sad,
Yeah, well, he's 66 now. Hopefully he's got a fair stretch ahead of him. But I mean, he's one of those dudes where if you could, when DNA splicing and CRISPR technology comes into vogue, if you could like select a voice, that's how I would like to sound. I mean, he's got the best voice of any man alive or dead.
Oh, he totally does. If I'm not mistaken, I thought he did the voice of I'm not sure if he did the voice of Spawn on the animated series or not. I have to look into that.
He did, and that show is an absolute masterpiece, and it is a complete disgrace that it doesn't get more credit. I mean, that was like one of the first like super violent, like like non-anime cartoons where there was cursing. There's like it's like the perfect recreation of Spawn. But yeah, as a voice for because I think it's Al Simmons, right?
Mhm.
For Spawn. I mean, I could not think of anyone better.
No, 100%. No, and yeah, that was one of the best cartoons ever made. One of the darkest cartoons ever made. And you can still watch on HBO, which is great. So revisiting that one's like something I do every year. You know.
They keep on talking about doing another Spawn movie, and I've often thought to myself, like, all you need to do is just go to that cartoon, look how that was done, and basically just do a live action movie with great effects, and then
Yeah,
you got the perfect movie. But if you try and color outside the lines and you don't do it the way that the cartoon was, disaster.
Todd McFarlane's been talking about that for many years now, that the movie is still moving along, and like supposedly Jamie Foxx is playing Spawn, which I have no issue with Jamie Foxx as an actor and stuff, but he's super talented. I just think he's a little small for the role, because I think he's only like 5'9", and Spawn's like a Batman sized dude,
Yeah,
6 foot.
he's a very big dude.
Yeah, he's
What did you think of? Just speaking of smaller guys, what did you think of Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne?
I dug it. I don't know why. He just had like a larger than life, like kind of, the way he like carried himself in the film. You know what I mean? He's not a big dude. I think he's probably 6 feet tall, but he's not a big intimidating guy. But he seemed really intimidating in the Batman for some reason. It's the way he carried himself.
Yeah, I was. I have to say, when I first heard that he was going to be the Batman, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a load of shit. I'm not even going to bother watching the movie."
Right.
And then the movie came out, and I didn't go watch it at the cinema, but I kind of started picking up on the chatter around it, and then I finally watched it here at home, and yeah, I think I was halfway through the movie, and I turned to my fiance, and I was like, I can't fucking believe how good this guy is. Like as Bruce Wayne, he just seems to, even though he doesn't have the look, he doesn't have the physique, he just nails it. Like it nails
Hmm.
it more so than, I mean, Christian Bale is one of my favorite actors, but I thought that Pattinson was a cut above. I thought that he did a better job as Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the best. He brought a real brooding element into the role, which Batman has
Yeah,
in the comics. So
yeah, 100%.
yeah, I totally dug that. All right, so we're moving to my number three, and there's going to be some similarities between my last three films here, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's going to my favorite subject matter, werewolves. So my number three favorite is the 1981 Joe Dante film, The Howling, which stands up there with top three favorite werewolf films of all time. The Howling's right up there with American Werewolf in London. It's up there with Silver Bullet and stuff. It's great. It's got some of the best special effects ever when it comes to like werewolf design and everything. I haven't really seen, well, after this film, I haven't seen werewolves designed this way. Like gives you that impact like it had in The Howling. So I wish more people would take notes and made their werewolves look like these type of werewolves here, because I've seen a bunch of crap over the years, unfortunately. But the Howling, this stands the test of time, and there's also a very quick cameo by the great Mick Garris in this. You can catch him playing one of the villagers and stuff. He's in it for like a couple minutes, which is really cool. So that's like a little Easter egg.
Yeah, this was another one of those where I was absolutely. I remember for years seeing the video cover as a kid and being absolutely terrified of it. And then when I finally got to see it, I just absolutely loved it. It's a fucking fantastic movie. And werewolf movies are, I don't know whether Jack Nicholson's Wolf was what kind of put that to bed, but they don't really seem to make all that many anymore. At least none
No,
that have come up on my radar.
no, and I was talking about this on another podcast that this year was supposed to be the year of the werewolf like revolution, where a whole bunch of like new werewolf movies are coming out and stuff, but it didn't really happen. But I hear it's on the horizon that always people got these like killer werewolf films that they want to throw out there and stuff, and I'm still waiting on that. And like the last good werewolf film I've seen, I guess recently, like in the past 5 or 10 years, was a German film called How, and that was a very interesting take on a werewolf. They don't look like you would expect a werewolf to look. They look more like a caveman or some type shit, but really good. It's a German werewolf film. It all takes place on a train, and I
Mm.
recommend that one a bunch. I think that's streaming on Tubi for free.
Yeah, no, I'll have to add that to the list. But yeah, just thinking about it now, there were some really good werewolf movies that came out in the 1980s. I mean, there was Silver Bullet, as you say, American Werewolf in London, and I'd say out of those three, I'd probably agree with you. The Howling is the superior.
Yeah, I definitely love it. And, Rick Baker is the man when it comes to making any type of werewolf design. He did a show in what was it, 1989, maybe 1990. It was a really brief TV series called Werewolf. It came out. I think Fox put it out or whatever, but it only did like 1 or 2 seasons. I think only 1 season. But Rick Baker designed all the werewolves on that one, and it looked fucking phenomenal. And it just got canceled after like 1 season, man. I remember watching it as a kid, like, oh, this is so fucking good. And you can't find it anywhere, unfortunately. It's all like VHS rips you can find on YouTube. Really, really bad quality though. Like whoever did it didn't do like the tracking on their VHS player and stuff, so it looks like shit. And I would love them to do like Blu-ray.
I swear I can remember that show, but I can't quite put my finger on whether I'd seen it or not. There's like when like the bell goes off in your head, like I'm pretty sure I've come across it or I had seen it. But anyway, all right. So my number two. So this could be either or, but I'm gonna say Predator. I'll talk about my number one in a second, but yeah, Predator. First time I saw that movie, I was 11 years old. I rewound the VHS and rewatched it on the same day 3 times. Mm-hmm. And I have watched it since 100 times plus. I think every single thing in the movie is perfect. I think Alan Silvestri's score is I mean, probably in my view in the top 5 film scores of all time. I think it's the best performance that Arnold Schwarzenegger ever did. It's the most perfect role for him. You know, I like Arnold, but you know, I also have watched all of his movies, and you do kind of have to accept a degree of atrocious acting. I mean, Commando is an example. He's absolutely terrible in that movie.
Oh yeah.
But this was just a movie. This was a role that was like literally felt like it was custom made for him. I mean, it was like he was just acting himself. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's just in terms of tone, in terms of effects, in terms of pace, every single thing just works. Like there's not a single character that feels like they're out of place or just shoved in there because you know they wanted to hit some sort of studio quota or anything like that. It's just a movie that works effortlessly, and I don't think that it. I think to this day, I think it will probably always be one of my favorite movies ever. I of course, I mean, Predator 2 I love. Predators I liked. The Alien versus Predator movies are a disgrace.
Yes.
The Predator is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, and I would have Shane Black thrown in jail if I ever came into if I ever took serious political office. The first thing that happens is that Shane Black gets thrown in prison for the travesty that was the Predator. And then Prey I enjoyed, but like I said on my podcast, it's not a Predator movie without the Alan Silvestri score, and it's also not a Predator movie without just some decent snappy dialogue. I mean, the dialogue on Prey literally couldn't be more bland if you fucking rinsed it in laundry detergent.
Yeah, it just didn't do it for me. I didn't dig Prey at all. I wanted to. I went in like a cool new Predator movie. I'm down. I didn't even like the way the Predator looked. He was too CGI'd out, you know. And originally he was supposed to be more practical. They had the whole outfit and everything for him, but last minute they decided to go mostly CGI with the way he looked, and it totally fucked things up.
Well, this is the other thing I was about to say. I generally speaking, I rail against any kind of redesign of the Predator because it's one of the most perfectly created creatures ever for film. Mm-hmm. It's interesting how it because I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast knows the story, but if you look at the original shots where they just had this weird little fucking sprite running around in the woods, that had Jean-Claude Van Damme in the suit. I mean, it just didn't work.
No.
And then the whole story about James Cameron sitting on a plane, and I think he had I can't remember whether it was Rick Baker or Stan Winston that was sitting next to him, who suggested that he do the dreadlocks and he do the mandibles, and that was when everything kind of clicked. and he realized, he has this just extraordinary creature. Or actually, no. I'm talking shit. It was the other way around. Rick Baker, who was designing the creature, he had to redesign it for the reshoots of the film, and it was James Cameron that told him to put in the mandibles and the dreadlocks.
Yeah, and that really sells it for me. It's like it gives it almost a human type quality to it, like makes it more, I don't know, just brings it out more.
It absolutely does, but again, it makes the creature much more menacing when it's a well done practical effect than when it's CGI. Like, I mean, I could tell they were trying to make the Predator look meaner on Prey, but it didn't look meaner. It looked fucking dumb. I like the idea they scaled back his weaponry, even though Thomas of Bloodbath pointed out something very interesting to me when I recorded an episode with him the other day. Not really interesting, but he got me on something, which is, how does the alien fly from planet to planet, but he doesn't have a shoulder-mounted laser cannon the way that he does in the first movie? He only has those arrows. That is a bit dumb. But yeah, I just don't fuck with perfection. Basically, is it should be the watchword there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Predator is a perfect film, and I love Predator 2 as well. Like that's another perfect film in my eyes. Especially the grittiness of it being in the fucking city and stuff amidst war. Like, you got gang wars going on, and you got the fucking Predator on top of all that. It's like,
I was about to say, the Predator just slicing and dicing like he doesn't give a shit. I mean, the cops are trying to do their own thing and clean the city up, and he just goes nuts. No, I love Predator 2 as well, and Predator 2 has some of the best quotes of any movie ever. That King Willie scene, in the streets when he goes, his foundation lies in the holy mountain.
Oh yeah,
that is just pure gold.
Yeah, I love that scene, and afterwards, like the fight that went on between them two, to see Predator walk away holding his head. I'm like, he's still screaming. It's so fucking brutal.
Yeah, genius, absolute genius. And of course, obviously the Billy fight in Predator as well. Especially when you're a kid, you kind of think, well, maybe he stands a chance. Look at those muscles, and then it's like 2 seconds and it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, he just fucking rips them apart.
Yeah.
All right, so my number 2 is the classic 1985 vampire film, and one of my all-time favorite vampire films is Tom Holland's Fright Night. This one came out the same year I was born, so I guess that's the reason I like it so much. But it's just great, man. I love the soundtrack to this one. It's got a great fucking vampiric like 80s soundtrack. It just fits it perfectly. And Chris Sarandon as a vampire is like, I mean, you can't pick a better like vampire than Chris Sarandon. I think he's got like the charm and everything, and the vampire looks, I guess, to be like taking your girl from you, then turn her into a vampire, that type of shit.
Yeah.
Dude, it's one of the best. They did a remake of it, and like 2010 or something like that. It doesn't even hold a candle to the original. Like Fright Night is just fucking fantastic, and the sequel is really good as well too. A lot of people forget about the sequel. I think they're both almost equally as good. So yeah, I love Fright Night.
Yeah, that was another one of those legendary movies where like there wasn't a video night in the 1980s that you went to, or in the early 90s as a teenager, where Fright Night wasn't one of the movies that they'd rented. And I agree with you. It's fucking fantastic. By the way, that it was a guy that wrote I believe it was for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show, that actually wrote the script to Fright Night.
Huh. I did not know that.
Yeah. And also something that folks might not be aware of, Toni Collette is in the movie as well. Yes. Toni Collette, who in my view is maybe one of the best actresses alive. And her turn in Hereditary, I think it's a complete disgrace that she didn't get an Oscar, or at least a nomination for that, because that's next level stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. But yeah, I guess that the Fright Night stuff with the screenwriter doing the Buffy stuff makes sense. So I was a fan of Buffy. I know Buffy seems pretty cheesy, but the TV show was really cool. Even like the movie with Pee Wee Herman that came out in the 90s. I like both, but the TV show was awesome. It had a great storyline. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I had an ex who was a massive fan of that show. I myself was not as into it. I think by the time that came to South Africa, I was already into stuff like The Sopranos.
Okay.
Or at the very least, when it came around and I was in a position to want to watch something like that, I was already into things like The Sopranos.
I got you. Yeah, I was still a teenager when Buffy came out, so it kind of worked its way into my high school years, So.
Yeah. By the way, I got it mixed up. I think Toni Collette is in the remake of Fright Night. By the way, I don't think she's in the original. But either way, I needed to find a way to shoehorn in the fact that she's fucking great, and that she should have gotten an Oscar nomination for Hereditary.
Yeah, you were totally correct. She's in the 2011 Fright Night that came out with fucking Colin Farrell playing Jerry, which I just didn't really care for that movie too much. It had some decent things.
I agree. Colin Farrell as the Penguin, by the way, is brilliant. Absolutely fantastic.
He's a good actor. I mean, he might look kind of douchebag-ish, but he's a good actor. Yeah. Wasn't he in True Detective season 2, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, he was very cool in that.
Yeah, and that season finally grew on me because number 1 kind of blew everything off for every other season after that because it was so fucking good. But number 2, season 2 grew on me a little bit. I like it now, so.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so my number 1 is without a single shadow of a doubt, The Shining, and I know I'm cutting it fine because I think when did it come out?
I think 80.
I was about to say early 1980s, May 23rd, 1980 it was released.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's not, I think, traditionally thought of as an 80s movie, but it was maybe the first 80s movie. And for me, it was, I borrowed a friend's bike and rode in like opposite direction wind for probably about 8 miles to go and rent the movie. My nose started bleeding on the way to the Blockbuster, and I had like half my face covered in blood from the fucking wind blowing the nosebleed up into me. So I looked like a complete mess when I got there, but I saw it the first time when I was 14 years old. It had previously been banned in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the very least, you weren't able to get to find it anyway. And so when I finally had an opportunity to see it, and I watched it, I was blown away. And I still am every time I watch the movie. I've got the 4K scan of it here at home, which is great because it's the extended version. So I think it's 143 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not much to the story that Stanley Kubrick removed, but it's more sort of color that he took out. Extended conversation with Lloyd, the bartender, and things like that. But it's one of those movies that, I kind of rank it up there with some of my other favorite films like There Will Be Blood, and Silence of the Lambs and The Exorcist, and it's a movie where it's like a fine wine or it's like a great steak. You just want to savor every moment of it, every single time you have it, or every single time you watch it. The performance from Jack Nicholson in that is next level. The direction is next level from Stanley Kubrick.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a movie that I think has a single fault in it. And I've watched it so many times now. It's like sometimes when you watch a movie too many times, you start to get you start to kind of fall out of love with it because of familiarity. Like the familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing. Right. I've honestly never once even come close to feeling that with The Shining. Every time I watch it, I still get that same thrill that I got, in one of the early viewings. And I'd say it probably, along with Predator, is probably the movie I watched the most.
And that's killer. And the soundtrack too of The Shining, like that's what really hits you when that music starts in there. It's like, oh,
Yeah, well, I mean, again, you talk about atmosphere and tension building up. I mean, literally from the second that kind of camera is swooping down on the car going up the mountain, and that song starts to play, that sets the tone for the movie, and it just doesn't relent. It's not a particularly gory movie, and it's not in terms of horror, it's pretty tame, all things considered. There's some blood and stuff like that, but it's nothing. There's nothing that you watch and you go, Jesus, I can't believe that they shove that in there. It's not Saw, but it does have a genuine sense of menace in it, and a lot of that comes from Jack Nicholson's performance. On the Blu-ray that I have, and I think it's on the standard Blu-ray as well, there's a really great documentary that was shot by Stanley Kubrick's daughter, and there's no narration to it. It's literally just filming them as they're shooting the movie. Mm-hmm. And one of the scenes, you can see it on YouTube, they show Jack Nicholson kind of getting fired up for that "Here's Johnny" scene, where he was taking the axe to the bathroom door.
Right.
He's kind of sitting talking and joking with the crew, and then he starts pacing around the room and he starts yelling and slapping his head and stuff like that, and he suddenly grabs the axe and he rushes for the door, and you can spot or you catch a couple of glimpses of Stanley Kubrick overseeing the whole thing, and then he shoots the scene, and then straight after he's completely fine again. And it gives me goosebumps whenever I watch that. It's like that dude could get himself in, switch Jack Torrance on and off the way that he did is fucking incredible.
Yeah, he's one of the best actors that ever lived, in my opinion.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, the intensity that he brings to that role is phenomenal.
And it's cool because it's different than the actual novel itself, and I like both of them. But it's cool to be able to go back and reread The Shining or do an audiobook of The Shining, and have a different outcome than the movie itself. And they both have their really good qualities. I remember Stephen King hated this rendition of his film, but it's one of the most popular horror movies that ever come out. So maybe now he's looked upon it as okay, maybe this is a good movie. It's just they kind of took liberties with his novel.
Yeah, well, I would say of my all-time favorite horror movies, without a shadow of a doubt, The Shining is number 2. The only movie I would consider, the only horror movie I'd consider to be superior is The Exorcist. But The Shining for me is, I know Stephen King didn't like that version of the film. I personally felt like it cut away a lot of the fat from his story, and it made the story a lot more menacing than it was. My problem with Stephen King has always been he has this ability to take a great idea and then to make it too family friendly. I'm generally speaking, I'm not a particularly big fan of these kind of mollycoddled happy endings. I thought the ending to It, for example, completely wrecked a fantastic book and fantastic film. And he's done that with a great many movies. I actually think the original ending to The Shining wasn't all that great either. I think that what Kubrick did was way better.
Yeah, it's a good ending. Yeah.
Yeah. So but I do know apparently he hates it. And Dr. Sleep was supposed to be much closer to the source material. Dr. Sleep was a disappointing pile of shit as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I enjoyed Dr. Sleep, but I get it. It's very hit and miss with a lot of people on that film. I read the book too right before I went into seeing the movies, so I guess reading the book, and it stayed really close with the novel, so I think I had a better appreciation for it. A little bit long though. The movie itself was pretty fucking long, because they did a director's cut of it. It was almost 3 hours long, I think. I was like, God damn, that was my biggest gripe about it. It's long, man.
Yeah, like I said, it was a movie that for me it felt like it was lacking teeth a little bit. There needed to be something that was a bit more. It was just a bit more menacing.
Right. Yeah, I totally understand. And the novel itself, it had some fewer those light moments, had more dark moments, I guess, a little bit heavier, and there's a little bit more blood in the novel. Especially with the scene with the baseball guy, the baseball kid that got taken by the traveling, what were they called, the knot, I believe. And the novel itself, is pretty brutal what they did to that kid, and they tamed it down a lot for the movie.
Yeah, so that's for sure where, if I were the director, that's where the juice gets turned up. Again, okay. I think it would have added so much more impact to it, but it is what it is. Either way, The Shining is a masterpiece.
Agreed. So my number one, and probably sometimes it goes to The Exorcist, sometimes it goes to this film, is like my favorite of all time. But now Mandy's in that list too, so it's like you got those three battling out. But for my favorite '80s film, it'd be 1981's John Landis werewolf classic, American Werewolf in London. Still to this date, like it's my all-time favorite werewolf film. The Howling's right up there with it too, but this edges it out just because I don't know. I find it more menacing with an escaped werewolf running around London, fucking especially the subway scenes. It's fucking horrifying. They added a bit of a reality to it, like you had a wild animal running around this fucking destroying people and stuff. And you don't really see a lot of the werewolf, which makes it that much more scarier to me. Like it's like the unknown. But when you do see him in those glimpses, it's fucking terrifying.
Yeah, no. Oh, again, I mean, that was a movie. I know a great many young kid from the 1980s that was permanently scarred seeing that movie. But yeah, fantastic movie. And I think that I mean that the whole idea of not showing too much of the monster and the just catching glimpses of it. I mean, they use that obviously to great effect in Jaws and in a lot of movies from the 80s, Alien as well. But it suits that film down to the ground because it ratchets up the tension as a result significantly.
Oh yeah, and also with American Werewolf in London, it still has the best werewolf transformation scene out of any film ever. Like, god damn it, that shit still haunts me. How they did all that stuff, like Rick Baker and company just fucking destroyed it. It's so good, and it hasn't been topped since in any other modern film I've ever seen.
Yeah. No, I agree. I am just surprised, by the way. I thought that your number one would have been Hellraiser. I was kind of almost expecting it.
Hellraiser's on the list, but like I want to go stuff that's not quite so obvious because Hellraiser had actually been number two, but I just got finished doing a whole Hellraiser episode with Carl. I'm
I listened to that. Very very good episode, by the way.
So Hellraiser's right up there with it. I just wanted to kind of change it up a little bit. And American Werewolf in London's always been my top favorite since I was a kid. It hasn't really changed. But Hellraiser, if I was to rank it, it'd be tied for like number two. So I just didn't throw it in there this time since I talked so much about it on that podcast. So
yeah, no, fair enough. Awesome. Well, dude, I'm glad we finally got to do this, and I'm glad I finally got to talk to you properly. We for sure need to do something. Maybe we should do something for Halloween on Into the Necrosphere. I'll figure something out, but I think we for sure need to do something. You're going to need to brush your beard for that, though.
Yeah. I got to be on video for that one. I made sure I brush up for that one. I look like a total axe murderer that my wife calls me at school.
and we can also on that episode we can talk a bit about tripping the mechanism.
Yeah, that would be great. I still love talking about my old band. Like we did some fun things, and I'm very proud of what we did. So
awesome,
excellent.
Cool. Well, dude, thanks very much. And like I said, we'll speak again very soon.
Sounds good, Jackie. And you have a good rest of your day.
All right, brother. Take care.
Later.
Bye-bye.